Welcome to Longevity Industries' presentation of the Destiny of Manufacturing podcast. I, of course, am your host, Dean Phillips, and I'd like to thank our sponsors, the Precision Metal Forming Association and the PMA's Educational Foundation, for helping us put this show together. With me today, I have Josh Perkins. Josh is with Piedmont Hoist and Crane. He is the Vice President of Operations. Welcome, Josh.
Thanks, Dean. Greatly appreciate it.
Full disclosure, Josh and I have known each other probably since 1990.
Yeah, I'd say it's more like 88, 89, somewhere. I don't want to date ourselves, but yeah, a long time.
A long time. And Josh and I actually ran our first marathons together. Way back when we could run.
Run is a generous word.
We finished our first marathons together.
Very good. Yes, we did. Yes.
There you go. Years and years ago. So right off the bat, Josh, what big things do you see coming down the road? What things are changing in manufacturing and in technology that you see being impactful?
Yeah, what I would say, Dean, is for me, it's all around the use of people and in automation, right? What I see big changes coming our way is, specifically in the overhead crane industry, is just a lot of people moving away from the reliance on having one person running a crane at all times, and being able to utilize that crane from anywhere, automated, from maybe even a booth where an operator can control two or three. We also have some cranes out there now that we're actually writing programs for and software for that are unmanned cranes, and they actually go in and work all day long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without an operator, just constantly in motion. So it's unique and new to us. So that's where I see the business going, and just those kind of automations where we can start to we actually have cranes now talking to each other. Very similar to technology that we had used, that I was introduced to in the water meter industry, in which, through the Internet of Things, if you would, the IoT technology, you have actually water meters talking to each other. One talks to one and talks to the next, and then goes and talks to a repeater, which sends a signal back to, the main office, right? The same thing with the cranes. They're talking to each other, and each crane knows what they're doing, and they have a master control center where they'll have someone in the master control center running all their different cranes. So that's where I see, the big jump coming is just more automation, more, technology in that direction.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because I can remember in my early days at handling specialties, we had a couple cranes in our facility, as well as little kind of standalone cranes. And of course, inevitably, they would crash into each other because somebody wasn't paying attention. And I think the idea that they can communicate, or at least be more aware in some kind of artificial way, I think is a great idea especially from a safety standpoint. People don't often realize the safety aspect of cranes and what can happen, especially when they're carrying something. One can be sitting there holding something up in the air, and then another one comes and smashes into it. It could be quite a significant safety hazard that occurs.
Yeah, I mean, you think that is certainly a big concern. And we don't see many cranes. Most of the cranes that we're selling nowadays, when you're selling more than one, usually have some kind of anti-collision software on them. Or if we're selling it to a manufacturer that already has a crane in place, a lot of them have the anti-collision software in there. So if you think about, we just shipped a couple 150-ton cranes. So you're picking up, two cranes picking up a 150-ton crane. They're working in tandem. They have to move. You can't have one moving without the other, because otherwise your load will start to sway. And when you're picking up 150-ton, per two cranes, could be up to 300 tons. That thing starts swaying, we're in a lot of trouble, right? So you just can't have that kind of thing. So, and I think back in the day, if you remember in our first place of employment together. We actually had the cranes where, guy would climb up into the crane and he would sit in that crane all day, every day, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, whatever. And, 80% of the time it wasn't moving. So, but he had to be there. They needed it when they needed it. So, so it's a different world.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. Just the thought of that. Cause it was so different, back then. So tell me a little, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. And I think also, what you're seeing nowadays, right, is especially through the whole last few years is, the reliance on, manpower is not always going to be as stable as it was in the past, right?
Right.
Before, when you had a good job, you had a good place to work, you had a good pay, you could find the right person. Nowadays, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Who knows how long that'll go on, but I think that's maybe led a lot of companies to drive to higher automation levels, right? Or looking into it at least.
Right. Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, let's circle back. Tell me about what got you into manufacturing and into technology. What started that for you?
So, I can go back to the ages when I was very young. Always just everything mechanical for me. I was never sit around and watch things like that. I always liked taking things apart, tearing things apart. And, my very first experience at anything engineering wise was, it's just probably, I can't even remember how old I was, but very young. Not even my teenage years yet. And our dryer broke in the house, and it was one of our sources of heat inside the house. Back then, we didn't have a lot of money, so I actually had to take the dryer apart, and I pulled it apart, and if you remember the old heater coils, which they still use today, I could see that it looked like a giant spring that was busted. Right, I didn't know what it did, but it was busted, so I went and got a bolt and put it together and put the dryer back together, and aha, it worked, right? And that was the start of the whole thing. And then, and then of course I wanted to make money, so I decided I had a rope, and I found a pulley, and I set it up in my garage, and decided to start my own little bike shop for all the local neighborhood kids, where I would, I'd take their pedals apart, the bearings apart, grease their bearings on their axles, and do all the stuff, straighten the wheels and all that stuff. So, just out of more necessity, and it's just something I've always enjoyed. And that's kind of how I got started. Took a lot of drafting classes in high school, and was headed off to school to, take drafting classes, and decided I'd rather do engineering. So switched over to the engineering program. And then, once I got out of school, right, really what kicked it off for me for manufacturing was I was lucky enough to get an internship with a company that, put me into a role as a manufacturing engineer. And lucky enough at the very beginning of my career I was assigned a project that said, hey, we're developing a new, basically, hydraulic press. We've never developed it before. And they said my role and responsibility was to take the prints from the engineers, follow them all the way through the shop, document any issues, problems, improvements, opportunities, all the way down through assembly, set the cost. That was my very first major introduction in manufacturing, and I fell in love with it right then and there. The noise, the chaos, all that stuff. The long hours, all that stuff, the grease, all that stuff. So I fell in love with it then.
That's great. I think that in general, people, I think they'll develop an interest which leads to that passion. And kind of like you said, the necessity aspect of, hey, this works out pretty well and I can fix other people's bikes. And then it kind of feeds itself in many ways. And it's, you get interested in it, then you have to learn new things, new technologies, and then that helps you to develop more products. More, first you start with how does it work, then you go into how do I make it better, and then developing more of an interest in finding a solution to that.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. I'd say the intrigue of figuring out how something works is the funnest part. And then, of course, there's always what I would think is the best part, especially from an engineer standpoint, is when somebody tells you can't do something, right? That's, it's, wait, you can't do that's impossible. Well, okay, from an engineering standpoint, it's like, no, okay, let's go take a look. Let's figure out how we can do this. The challenge is the best part.
Sure.
I knew at some point that I was not gonna, I wasn't gonna stay in engineering forever, and that's when I, decided at some point I wanted to take that next level, and it's the challenge of running a business, right? So went back to school and got my master's degree, and in my MBA, and that's kind of led me to where I am today. So it's been very fruitful, exciting, enjoyable, and I'm loving every minute of it.
When you look back, what was one of the things that was the most impactful for you when you got into engineering? Was there some type of a book that was this book changed my life, or somebody that was influential that kind of made a lot of doors open for you, where it kind of pulled the pieces together?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple avenues. So I read a couple books that really, opened up my eyes, right, to a lot of things. The first one was a book by Jim Collins called Good to Great, which I think a lot of people have heard and read, right? And I think you read through that and it's just like, wow, it just makes a lot of sense, right? It was a great book, and it just, kind of drove me. And I'm not a big book reader. I'll be upfront and honest about that, right? There was another book by a gentleman by the name of Pascal Dennis, and it was a short book. It's called Andy and Me, right? And this book is probably only 30, 40 pages long, but it described, it was a story about lean, right? Learning to see, and it described a fictitious auto plant and the struggles that a new plant manager was going through to get it up and running, and it encompassed a lot of things for me. The struggles that you probably see, or I've seen, at least in the operations side, is, first you got to build a culture, right? And for me, culture all starts around ownership and passion, right? And when you go into a new facility, not everybody's, on that same page. So you got to build a team. So I would say, the thing that I read, or the thing that I took from Andy and Me, was how this gentleman went around building his team using lean principles, right? So a lot of people talk about, I think when they think about lean, they think, hey, it's this big whole thing. You put it down on paper and you launch it. No. Lean to me is, there's two parts to lean. Lean is personally just the right way to do business. It's it's simply an explanation of the right way to do business and use some tools with it. But it's also, little hits at a time, little base hits, if you will, making that analogy to baseball. A lot of people like to make. It's base hits, right? It's not like you put out this big system and say, boom, I've got lean, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, the other thing that lean is not is I could go out to any facility right now, and I could lay out Gemba boards for them. I could lay out, flow charts. I could lay out, value stream maps, all that stuff for them. And then, implement them out on the floor. And then what happens when you're asking the guys to report on it? They look at you and say, "I know, it's your board," right? So I quickly learned, it's like, okay, the right way to do this is to let the team do it. Let your workers do it for you, not your workers. Let your associates do it for you. Whether your managers, whether your hourly associates, whether whoever, and I use them in purchasing, I use them in engineering, I use them in the floor. I use them in, assembly, welding, manufacturing, everywhere, right? Because it's just the right way to run the business. But you have to let that individual in that department who's leading the department and his people develop those boards, right? Because then they own it, right? Then the data means something to them. If it's something I dictate, well, that's a board Josh made. Those are his dates,
right?
Right. So, but Andy and me was just, again, a very simple book, a quick read. I'd recommend it to anybody that just kind of, I see it now, right? I see it. So those helped. Those two things. I would say for mentorships, I had a gentleman who was when my longest tenure. I had a gentleman that was my mentor at that place, and he's the one that kind of taught me to say, push your way through deadlines. There's always going to be deadlines. There's always going to be things that go wrong. There's always going to be, you can always do something, and don't avoid issues, right? If you see an issue, an issue, it's not going to go away, right? So you just better hit it head on, right? And he also taught me to talk openly and frankly to people, right? You don't need to be mean, nasty, or rude about it, but you need to give people open and honest feedback and let them know where you're thinking and, address the situation up front. So very lucky to have met him and have him, strike a personal, friendship as well as a working friendship. We did a lot of work together when we were launching new products, and, the one thing he taught me is he was always there. Like, so if we're working, we work some Saturdays and some Sundays, long days, when we're launching a new product, and he was always there. And one thing I learned that from a leadership standpoint, as a leader, you need to have that subservient leadership style. And when your guys are going through it, you don't want them going through it alone. It needs to be important to me as if it's important to them,
Right.
So I was very lucky.
Yeah. I think that you're kind of a sum of those people and experiences that helps you to be who you are today. I think that's true for all of us, that if you didn't have that experience, you didn't read that book, you didn't connect with that person, that would have greatly changed your style or changed the way that you've become as a leader or expanded as a leader. And I think that's really a critical thing that people don't always understand, is this continuous learning aspect that all of us, I believe, if you're in engineering or you're in manufacturing or technology, is this constant quest to learn, to do better, to be revising your ideas, and always work to improve. And it sounds like a lot of that you've adapted to.
Yeah, I mean, I learned something from every person that I've ever met, every role that I've ever held, every person that I've ever managed or been managed by, not only at work, but also in person. I've spent with 3 sons, I spent a lot of time coaching a lot of sports. And I think, you can draw some parallels between the two. But, I tell a lot of folks, and even in this role, I'm not going to be the smartest guy that you ever meet, but I can build a team, and I build a team with, every kind of player that you need, right? Like I'll make a hockey analogy because, coached a lot of hockey during my time, and it's, hey, I need goal scorers, I need grinders, I need goalies, I need guys that want to pass, they don't want to score. But the important part is I need the guys that want to work together and care enough about each other to be able to, take it to the next level. And that's what building a team is about. And I think when you go in and take over any organization, you got to quickly filter that in and figure out who the right people are and who aren't the right people. So, and you learn that by meeting people and, learning about different traits that everybody has over the years. And each person I've met's also changed me, right?
Right. Technology-wise, what kinds of things are you excited about seeing that are evolving right now? Because it is a very fast-moving world, almost to the point where it was when we first got computers in the 80s and into the 90s. And then when the internet hit, then everybody was able to connect. There's now with things like VR, AR, with technologies and IoT, and then, of course, additive manufacturing and all of these things combined. How do you sift through all of that to say, we could use this, we could use that in order to improve our processes, improve our products? What kinds of things do you look for?
So, first and foremost, it's always been safety, quality, delivery, cost, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, obviously, the things I'm most interested in how we can do things safely, right? And anything that's around safety. So when you think about cranes and large loads, usually up in the ceiling, and in things like that, critical areas of safety, you always think about the more you can automate it, the more you can take out, that decision, because in reality, when you think about industrial accidents or any accident, right, the person who has the accident is usually, it's been my experience, Dean, that they're trying to do the right thing. Hey, I'm just going to get, maybe something happened to the machine. I'm just going to, it jammed up a little bit. I don't really want to shut it down, lose all the production. I want to make the production. So I'm trying to do the right thing, and I stick my hand in the machine, right? It's that 5-second lapse of judgment, right? So, and it's, again, I think anything we can do from a safety standpoint to eliminate putting a person into a bad spot, right? That such things as like anti-collision or remote running of operation of cranes, right? So there was, back when we started, there was no remote running of cranes. You guys sat in the crane and you had all the controls right in front of them, right?
Right.
Well, now if the guy you put 2 or 3 guys in a control house, they're looking over cranes, and they're saying, hey, I can run this crane from here. I see what they're all doing. I see how they're intertwined with each other. We put some, with technology, anti-collision software, or having them run in tandem, at all times, right? Again, would be just those kind of things are amazing to me what they, what we can do now versus, and it's not like it's brand new technology, but, it keeps enhancing itself, right? And, it's good. I would also say, we have now, again, we're a manufacturing company. We actually have engineers who are working remote, right? Mm-hmm. And I'll just stick with the engineers. You have other jobs as well. But when you think of a manufacturing company and you think of your design engineers and they're actually able to work remote, from their personal perspective, that's a good thing, right? They get to, it seems that there's a whole generation now out there that enjoys having a bit of remote time, compared to going into the plant every day. But you also are able to open up the people that you can hire, right? Maybe someone who you couldn't hire before because they were in a certain location, but they'd be perfect for your job. Maybe there's an opportunity for that now, right? Where you can start to say, hey, I can start to use this person that really will help me out, and they don't necessarily need to be here all the time, so it works out for them as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the internet has just opened that up considerably, and I think what's even made it more and more is the cloud, as the cloud enterprising and cloud ability to work through the cloud allows them to work remotely effectively, as opposed to just working remotely coming in through I would say dial-up. But I think anybody young at NAR probably don't understand what the dial-up means. You remember the first 2 days of those noises when you're dialing in on your internet. So I think those kind of things get me excited. I am also excited to see, hey, the additive manufacturing. it's just amazing to me the advances, the rapid advances, I would say, relatively speaking, from, you never heard of it, it seems, 8-10 years ago, to the first time you heard about this thing that's going to come out now, to the actual kind of components you can make now, right? And the advances that they keep making in that, right? And it's interesting to see where that's going to go. At what point do you start? At what point do you start? Being able to, get into even bigger parts, stronger parts, more diverse parts. And I don't even know enough about it to say how far they've come, but it's just amazing every time I see the additive, and the 3D printing and all that stuff and what they're coming up with, right? It's amazing technology, actually. So let's say for me, one big advantage is the way that the different departments will tie together in the future, right? Being able to have all the departments, running off, more common platform, and
Right.
people being able to talk, and see the same language, see the same thing. Because to me, that I'm a big believer in build a system and run it deep versus, run it wide and run it shallow, right? So getting everybody to talk the same language, see the same data, see the same things is good. When I first started out, they had these SCADA systems that we're developing, which, basically is, you get feedback from every one of your machines all the time. You know what's going on, you know what's happening, you know what's running. You can see all that data real time. The ability to see where we stand in production at any moment. It's just the kind of feedback you need to be able to run a business. So those are all great, great things that I see. I see a lot of stuff I can, honestly, I see a lot of stuff I can do on my phone now through apps that could never do before, right? And
True.
you just think about your data, and data's power.
Mm-hmm.
I need enough data to be dangerous, right? And you're just able to collect more and more data. So I think I think there is a point where you get too much data, obviously, right? I think that you can get caught in the analytical world and stop moving forward. But I need enough data to gather enough information, know that you're making a good decision, and then go. So those are the kind of things I see that are just going to continue to grow and prosper. We see a lot more in robotic welding now. I know it's been around for a long period of time, but for the kind of work that we're doing, it's somewhat new. But the cobots or job bots, if you want to call them that, the cobots, where they're actually, we might get 4 or 5 pieces that are the same, and I can have someone train the first piece, and then the next 3 pieces weld themselves, as opposed to, going and writing all that programming language, right? Compared to, you used to write all the programming language, and, if you made 1 or 2, 3 parts, it wasn't hardly worth it. But now you can, use jobots in welding, or cobots they call them, in welding, and just be able to, train it on the very first piece, and it goes make the next 3 piece. Now I take that person, that associate, and put them on another job, so make them even more effective, right?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head too. Is that we have more technology that's user friendly in things like robots, things like even additive, that you don't need. Used to be, even a computer, you had to know code to some extent or programming in order to get it even to do anything. When computers started, it was just that C prompt, and you had to know what to type in order to even get it to do anything. Now, everything with graphical user interfaces became more accessible, and I think you hit it on the head with the robots and cobots, is that the programming has become more user friendly and more adaptive. And that's made it accessible to people at all levels. Do you find that that's really been one of the key ingredients, is being able to make it accessible for people on the floor to do?
Yeah. So for instance, I 100% agree, right? I have some of my guys on the floor. They're more advanced, usually. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but they're usually younger guys that actually pull up prints on their phone.
Right.
You know, right out on the floor, right? They can go in and they can see it, and they pull up prints on their phone. And we're in the process of, investigating. There's a lot of plants that do this already, but just the ability to go out and the way you organize your work, like we talked about before, they will be able to scan in a job number or type in a job number that they're working on, and it pulls up the entire assembly print. Touchscreen technology allows them to touch on a certain print. If they want to check a certain dimension, they can put all that right in there, and they can just do it with their fingertips and touch it, and then also measure it. And eventually, I would like to see where, hey, the guy has, there's automated data collection software out there.
Mm-hmm.
But it'd be great if I could pull it up on the screen, presses a certain dimension that he wants to measure, measures it, it automatically collects that and puts it into your quality, your quality folder, right? That he's checked that, he's done his prints. All of that, along with, at each station along the way, you're doing quality inspections, you're recording all that. So you now have a complete, if you remember this part, a complete record book. Mm-hmm. Of all the parts and prints. I'm bringing back some bad memories. I wouldn't say bad memories. You remember those?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we have a complete record set of all the information. If you remember how critical that was to us building back machines back in the 80s when you and I were together. Mm-hmm. If you didn't have a correct record set, you didn't know what to tell the customer, what you were, what part was you thought you had it. Let's say somebody didn't update a print. You'd go and make that part for the customer and send it to them, and it didn't fit in their machine. That was never a good situation, right? So, but this gives you an electronic record set all the way from, the customer's original order, all the way out to every final check, to shipment, to installation, and, that's customer calls up in the future. You talk about customer service. Yep, I got it right here. Yes, we measured this. Yep, and everything is good, right? And I can give them a part number or anything else. So it's just, that kind of technology is fantastic. And I would say the other part is that you got to make it simple yet intuitive, right? And I think that's the key to software now, is that people are starting to make it more simple and intuitive, right, so that it has a wider array of people it can catch.
Yeah, and I think if you expand on that, think about your phone. Does it come with instructions? To some extent, but the reality is that if you make it intuitive, you don't have to have a manual that goes along with it. People just know, well, this is where you look for that. This is where this is. And this is how you launch an application. And there's a lot of assumptions made, because if you took somebody who had been in a coma for 20 years, probably couldn't pick up a phone and make it even work. So True. Some of it is an element of they've evolved. Everybody's evolved, and I even talk about this, about the voice command things that you might have in your house, whether it's a Google or an Alexa style Echo or something like that. People are often believe that, oh, well, these devices are learning from us. It's the other way around. We're learning the key words to activate those. They're not just waiting and you say something. If you don't say, hey, Google or Alexa, you're not using any of the trigger words to get it to start even. I found that out when I got one for my parents, and they're trying to make the thing dial a phone number, and they say first the phone number, and then they're like, oh, well, I got to give it the area code. So then they just say, the area codes. You can't do that. You can't go backwards and start editing your thoughts as you're telling it this. You have to start all over again and give it the command that triggers it, and then all the other information. But I think that technology, like you said, it has to be intuitive. And the more intuitive we can make it, the more accessible, and then by extension, the more value it adds. So I'm looking forward to that.
I agree. I mean, you think about it, along those same lines. Your parents can also just speak in and say, "Call Dean." Right. Right? And boom, it goes right automatically to it, right? Again, simple and intuitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's what, I think that's where technology needs to continue to head, right? So, using, combination of simple and intuitive and human nature to its advantage to continue to develop.
Right. I agree. Last thoughts, sir.
Last thoughts. Look, I'm excited to see where manufacturing heads. I do hope that we continue to bring more back, to the States.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's real turn towards some local production, produce where you produce, right, type situation. So I think that's important for us.
Mm-hmm.
From a technology standpoint, I mean, the sky's the limit. You look at you look at all the space programs. You look at all the advanced technologies they've brought to us as as manufacturing, and you think about all these advanced technologies that companies that are out there that are working, and a lot of smart people thinking about different things that you can do. It's only going to make manufacturing stronger, better, right, and make it more enjoyable to be here. And then I think bring more people in. We need to bring more people into the manufacturing industry, and technology is one of those ways that will help us drive that direction. So,
fantastic, sir. I really appreciate it today. Thank you for being here, Josh.
My pleasure. I really greatly appreciate the opportunity.
Great to have you, sir. Everybody,
I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Everybody, want everybody to know Precision Metal Forming Association has helped us to put this show on. We really appreciate their support, and make it a great day.